What is an MMO? An MMO is a shared, persistent world where a community of players share the experience of being in that said world together at any given time. The original idea for an MMO was to create a, quote, second life for players to enjoy virtual escapism and experience a living, breathing virtual sandbox with other real-life players. Where single-player games had a heavy focus on NPCs, MMOs had a heavy focus on players as the players shaped the world within the confines of set rules, systems, and limitations created by the developers, mostly for the sake of immersion. You wouldn't want someone shooting an Uzi and flying through the sky shooting guitars from his dick in your fantasy MMO, right? With that said, everything within those limitations were a big thumbs up for the player to shape their own experience. Interactivity in a second world has been an idea that was extrapolated upon even before the video game medium, as we could see in the creation of the original pen and paper Dungeons and Dragons.
The game is called Dungeons and Dragons, D&D, and it's become popular with children anywhere from grammar school on up. Not so with a lot of adults who think it's been connected to a number of suicides and murders. The idea of the game, which is played by highly imaginative and intelligent kids, is to assume the role of one of the characters. One game can go on for weeks or even months.
Now, I'm no history buff.
Look behind us into something called history, a sort of rear view mirror for time. So that's where I'm going, back there.
But I'm sure Dungeons and Dragons wasn't the first. As humanity has proven time and time again, we like to get lost in the wonderment of our imaginations together. Ever play pretend with your friends when you were growing up? Yeah, you did. Don't you fucking lie to me. We all created a world with sticks as swords and trees as dragons, and we had to save the princess, which was just a fucking rock in the tree. So let's fast forward past Dungeons and Dragons, past multi-user dungeons like Habitat, The Realm Online, and Neverwinter Nights, and let's look at 1997.
It was me!
Where we can look at Richard Garriott's idea for a fantasy game involving several thousand players who can all play in a shared fantasy world, which would be at minimum 10 times larger than any MUDs prior. Ever wonder why the super vague term massive precedes multiplayer online? Well, that would be it. Let's look at the pioneer of MMOs.
Enter the world of Ultima Online. It's more than a fantasy, because it really exists. It's more than a game, because it never ends. And it's a giant leap beyond anything you've ever seen before. To begin, create your own character and choose your appearance. Play whatever role you want, from wizard to warrior, or bard to barkeep. We invite you, and several thousand of your closest friends, to live, quest, fight, love, or hate in a fully persistent world, where every action you take affects the lives of others. Who will you be? What will you do? Where will you travel? Ultima Online. Go beyond life as you know it, to an adventure more incredible than you can imagine. Ultima Online.
To quote Garriott, it was very important to us that Ultima Online be a game with a theme and story and quest, and then support the larger, grander activity. We don't want it to be just player controlled and dominated. We want it to be an Ultima experience with all the qualities that people expect from that. The goal was set: offer the player as much freedom as possible while maintaining the theme, setting, and story of Ultima. Ultima Online would host features like persistent player housing, skill-based character progression without levels or classes, but got better over time as your character performed that skill more and more. A crafting-focused, player-driven economy, and on release, unrestricted player versus player combat. Garriott's team even went so far as to implement an artificial life engine to make the ecology of the world be more realistic. Like bunnies humping bunnies and making more bunnies. And then players would have to kill some off to manage the ecosystem in that area to reduce overpopulation, that sort of thing. But what Garriott and co didn't realize is how sadistic players are. And the next thing you know, all the cute fuzzy wuzzy animals like deer, llamas, moose, and the aforementioned bunnies in the world were killed off too quickly to even allow the simulation to begin. So in the end, it was scrapped and ripped from the game. What the Ultima team did succeed in creating was a true fantasy shared virtual experience. They created the systems, theme, rule set, but handed the tools to the player base and said, create your own story together. Live this life in a world of swords and sorcery, dragons and giants, dungeons and castles, and come up with your own creative ways with the support of the community to conquer these lost lands. Okay, I made that last quote up, but it sounded cool. There were no instances. Everything was part of the world and open to the public. Unless of course you banned a player from being able to enter your home. There were lands where the monsters were so powerful and so difficult to handle that you wouldn't see any single player out there without friends. Until much later when the community started theory crafting ways to do it, but even then, it would not be considered the norm. And would be incredibly risky if you couldn't run your naked body back in time to collect your valuables from your corpse. After UO's success, the neurons across the game developer world all start firing off into their own imagination on what could be capable, nay possible, in this format. You started seeing MMOs pop up with very different formulas like EverQuest or Dark Age of Camelot, or games that look to take the Ultima formula a step further, but in a different setting and with bigger jumps in computing power and technology, like Star Wars Galaxies.
Star Wars Galaxies, this isn't just a game, it's an online universe.
You can always log on. There's always something new there for you.
It's a persistent world.
Who hasn't wanted to visit Jabba's palace? And in there you can meet Jabba the Hutt, Han Solo, the Emperor, Luke Skywalker.
I can actually talk to these people.
The world is a living, breathing, thriving place. You can go visit Naboo,
Tatooine and Endor.
There's no beginning and no end.
24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The galaxy just keeps on moving.
This was the golden age of MMOs. Then an indie company comes along with their own established IP, complete with deep lore and stories and a massive fan base familiar with it. Blizzard Entertainment announces World of Warcraft.
In a land of mighty kingdoms, new threats emerge. Ancient alliances are reforged. And an unexplored world awaits. Blizzard Entertainment proudly invites you to experience Warcraft from a whole new perspective.
2004 marks the year that Blizzard killed the MMORPG genre. With their tight, class-based gameplay mechanics, the holy trinity of group composition, and a way to funnel players into the same content, World of Warcraft set the stage and the perfection of the theme park MMO. While vanilla World of Warcraft did offer a lot of freedom to progress your character through different paths they took through their leveling process, it had a heavy focus on that leveling experience, doing what most players love doing, killing stuff, then wearing their boots. Classes felt distinct from each other. They had RPG elements in the way your character's stats were equipped, like warriors running around with staves and Giga Chad levels of spirit. You still had the levels of freedom before min-maxers, YouTube guides, and streamers to really play your character how you wanted within the confines of your class. Quests took you all over the place and at times felt super random, unlike modern WoW today. Everything you did felt like an adventure, and the world felt massive, and you were just a relative nobody making your way through the ranks by helping the local NPCs swat bugs or pick apples, until you eventually bash your head against the Black Dragon Onyxia and her Black Dragon flight for the sake of your faction. World of Warcraft did everything right to gain mass appeal into their game. It was astounding what they had accomplished in making it so incredibly easy for a gaming veteran or someone new to step into Azeroth and just have fun, with or without friends. With higher level zones looming on the horizon and that sense of, I wonder what's over there, always pushing the player forward to get to the next tier, the next zone, the next dungeon. To add into that, Blizzard's approach was to limit the number of goals a player could have with illusions of choice that ultimately all led down the same path. Do this content. This made the grouping up process much easier than you would find in the classic sandbox MMO, as you need a party of 3 to 5 to complete the elite content and dungeons in the game, then later 40 players to complete the endgame raids. To make this process even easier, players made guilds so that when you logged on, you could see all the people you enjoyed doing this content with in one big social community within an even larger social community, and this further increased the rate at which you were able to get groups for various, albeit not really different, content in the game. This created social bonds that kept players logging on every day, allowing the game to continue to grow in size. The game only got better and more content was added. Level caps were increased and Blizzard kept doing everything right. Not only were they collecting on the $15 a month, but millions of people were willing to drop another $40 to join their friends in each subsequent expansion, only further cementing people into the game. Not only that, but with each hard reset on gear, experience, and the likes, new players were more willing to jump in on each release and go through the grind from level 1 to 70 without feeling too far behind. And again, with Wrath of the Lich King leveling from 1 to 80. It was the perfect experience, and it caught the eyes of others in the industry. But instead of
imagination
neurons firing off, it was $ neurons, and it was in overdrive. Business executives and publishers across the industry asked, you mean to tell me people will keep paying to play your game even after they bought it? How can we get in on this? So let's go a little into economics for a second. World of Warcraft was raking in hundreds of millions of dollars every month, while they only needed to develop small updates like balance patches and the likes, with slightly larger content patches biannually across each expansion, because players were still logging on week after week to progress their raid teams through endgame content. That sounds like a lot of money to be had, with expenses being fairly low after the fact. Now, when it came time to develop their prospective MMOs, would you look at that?
Would you look at that? Just look at that.
MMOs are incredibly expensive to make. So pretend to be someone who has smoothed out their creativity and innovation processors in their brain and look at it from a I want to maximize profits perspective. We can save on costs on the front end, reduce the risk of failing, copy and paste what people already love, add 1 or 2 things that makes us different, and ship the game. Now we have a blueprint. As MMO after MMO claiming to be the next WoW killer was literally the game they were claiming to kill. But hey, this one looks like Star Wars, and this one has more realistic graphics.
Roaches!
When you're fighting sunk cost fallacy, if you make the same product that those customers are already using, why would they ever use your product? But if you were trying to grab the attention of players who were getting tired of their current product and looking for something new and fresh, one could reasonably argue that being incredibly different from your competition would most likely pull those players in and lock them in for quite some time. Passion, innovation, and creativity can breathe new life into your game, and the competition set from the variances of multiple games drives the genre forward to greater heights. Then Blizzard did the unthinkable. They killed the community aspect of their game. and kept going down that rabbit hole without pressing on the brakes. They added the LFG LFR system cross server. From that point on, even Blizzard sunk into the let's make this more solo player friendly and add conveniences, only to turn their massive world into something smaller, a city, complete with menus. Then every MMO after that was expected to also have a queue system. We have entered an era where single player games with other players in it are now considered MMOs. No longer harkening back to the time of Second Lives and virtual worlds that games before World of Warcraft were trying to create. Imagine an alternate reality where MMOs didn't follow this path, and imagine how close we would be right now had innovation and creativity been kept alive to create truly magnificent, real, virtual worlds. So where can future MMO developers fix this? With technology growing in the way that many games in all genres have innovated and continue to innovate into extremely memorable experiences, pushing the boundaries and oftentimes inventing their own genres through the relative risks they take, I don't think it would be wild to say that we can come out ahead of this. I think that future MMO designers should look at their single player counterparts and ask, what makes this feel so good? A huge step forward for these developers is to look at the gameplay of Breath of the Wild or any Larian Studios games and how they use systemic gameplay to create interesting moments for the player to experience. Don't take too much control away from the player. Instead, do the opposite and give control back to the player to play with those systems as they see fit. Discovery through those systems feels so damn good. Then look at the open world structure of games like Elden Ring and how it draws players into different directions without ever telling them to. Like a big ass yellow tree in the distance. Get away from the loot explosions, dopamine hit, and create something genuine to keep players engaged. Most of all, create a game with a community of players in mind who will be engaging in these systems together. Give reasons to play together, no matter their playstyle, build, or whatnot. Give reason for players to only want to craft and give them their own set of systems that they can work through to become the best crafter and make a name for themselves in the community. Not some arbitrary achievement that the game has to pat you on the back and say good job. Look to games like Kingdom Come Deliverance, where you wander past a bush and think to yourself, I wonder what's over there to discover in this incredibly immersive world. Or maybe a player discovers blood on a path that the player started wandering down, and that leads to a quest without the player knowing it's a quest because there's no quest marker or journal update. The player discovered something that led to a whole investigation organically. The payout is they found it, they connected the dots, and now they could tell their friends about it, and it's become part of their story on their journey through your world. That is all. See ya.